Support the show by donating at themusicbuds.com. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Music Buds podcast. This is episode number 18, and my name is Henry. This week, I'm honored to be joined by Luke Bentham of The Dirty Nil. Luke, it is so nice to meet you. I truly have loved this band for years, and it's very special, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me on, Henry.
Oh, sure. Well, how are things going?
Well, I think given the circumstances, things are going very well. We've got an album coming out at the end of the year.
Sweet.
And so we've just been very busy doing things to support that release. And yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot of temptation to focus on the specific limitations of this time period. But my mind during most of this year has felt pretty exhilarated by the landscape, just because it seems like, to me, there's been a bit of a reset of the music industry, which obviously I think its downsides are very evident. But I think that if you look on the positive side, that there's going to be a much needed reset to many aspects of the whole music universe. And so, in that vein, as I said, I found it quite exhilarating with our team to just focus on what we can do and not on what we can't do.
Yeah. With that being said, being from Canada, growing up, what was the music scene like around you? Like, particularly the rock scene? Like, were there a lot of opportunities there, or did you kind of have to go out and find other avenues for music?
Well, we grew up in a small little suburban town called Dundas, which is, to anyone who's not been there, which is highly likely, it's kind of like the Shire.
Oh, okay, cool.
Basically, from Lord of the Rings. It's a lot like that. So it was a good place to be, to kind of get into trouble, because there wasn't a lot to do necessarily. So, I mean, we had a lot of fun in our early years, just kind of getting things going and not having anybody telling us that we're doing it wrong, because there was nobody really around our parents would tell us that we were always playing too loud, but that was about it. We had no real older mentors in terms of bands. There wasn't really a Dundas music scene. And in Hamilton, there was a music scene, which is it's about 500,000 people. That's where we all live now. But we were just completely unaware of everything happening there. And even just getting to go play a show in Hamilton seemed like we were going to go play on Saturday Night Live. So our goals in the early years were quite modest. And I think in that vacuum, we had a lot of freedom to develop. And our musical influences were mostly coming from things like Much Music, which is basically the Canadian MTV.
Right.
And we were the first YouTube generation. So we were indoctrinated into the glory of classic rock through video formats. And I think that was that left a very important impression on us and our DNA as a band very young. But it wasn't until we really started, we got into our 20s, when we started establishing real laudable goals. When we were kids, when we were teenagers, when we started the band, we just wanted to make music. Basically, we had pretty pure and earnest goals for what we wanted to do. I never really thought about making it a career, but I also at the same time knew that I didn't want to do anything else other than music. So we didn't really narrow down on our goals until we hit our 20s and really started touring the world, particularly the United States, a lot, when we really started focusing on what we really wanted to do with music. And through touring, we met a lot of bands that gave us a lot of good advice, and some bands that gave us some bad advice. And
I remember you having mentioned you would go up to bands and would be like asking them, about like, how should we go about doing this? How should we go about doing that? Part of it was, drive and motivation to get to know the world of music and how to level up. Was that kind of how it was, or?
For sure. I think the biggest, our one of our only opportunities to kind of get a glimpse into formulating a game plan was when we were put as the opening band on a bill when we were in high school, and the headliners would be, you know, professional musicians of varying calibers and statures, and we would punish them unrelentingly with questions asking, how did you do this? How did you do that? And basically ask them questions until they told us to fuck off.
Yeah.
So in that spirit, I think we definitely have a lot of patience now for younger people that approach us and asking if we have any insights. We're happy to tell them what we can. But I think the largest thing that I've really taken away from the whole thing is that there is no one way to do it, but there are certain organizational tidbits of advice that I think are universal when it comes to any kind of business operation or creative enterprise that are, as I said, universal, that don't necessarily are pretty standard. Like, you know, when younger bands or artists solicit advice from our band, I think we usually tell them, you know, make sure that your goals are in line, make sure that you have a kind of clear division of who does what in the band. And as I said, the main one is to really make sure you all have the same goals of music, and not one person is kind of flirting with it and the other people are really, really serious about it. You kind of have to all align yourselves somewhat. But we were lucky enough that I think we, in our early days, we just had a complete naive, we're going to rule the world attitude, even though we had no plan to do so.
Right. Well, talking about growing and developing, you did get to open for The Who.
Yes, indeed we did.
Which, I mean, I can't even imagine that feeling. What was that like?
Well, when we got the call to do it, it came at a really good time because we were on tour in England. And I was particularly bummed out about some completely unrelated aspects of, I can't even remember what I was bummed out about, but the call went something like this. It was from our manager, and he said, okay, I got some bad news. We're not going to play on the same day as Metallica for this festival anymore. I was like, what the fuck? And then he said, but we are going to play on the same day as The Who, and you're going to get to open for them.
Jeez.
And I mean, that was The Who were our favorite band growing up, Kyle and I. I mean, we basically named our band after a clip of the Dirty Mac at the Rolling Stones Rock and Roll Circus that they filmed in 1968, and they only released it in the 90s. And there was the Who performance from the same show that really just inspired us to want to play music. It was chaotic and fun, and just displayed such a just raw power vibe that we were and animated physically, that we were definitely completely romanced by that version of music. So, I mean, it is the ultimate back in time high five to get to play for sure.
Yeah. Talking about your music, I mean, the one thing that struck me right away is there is this like incredible raw, intense, and also fun energy to your music. And every time I am feeling that and am in the need for that, I can go to your music, and your music immediately comes to mind. Like Smoking is Magic, if that is like not one of the most adrenaline fueled badass songs. And like, it's songs like that I think you really capture what you're just saying, is there's a great raw energy to your music, and it is very unique.
Well, thank you. I mean, that's, I think that when we're developing a crop of music, I mean, part of it for us is, I think it's just more of my own personal philosophy, but I don't like the assignment of saying, okay, well, we need a song, so let's make a song. I don't like doing that. I'd rather work for a year and play with everyone for a year and develop 10 or 12 songs that we feel really good about. And when you do it that way, you can kind of say, well, okay, we've got some songs that are like this, but I think to kind of round out this crop, we need a couple more intense songs, or we need, something more slow and powerful, or something more dynamic. that's the way that I think, and we were raised on albums too. So, I mean, something like Smoking is Magic was born out of, we've got a few good kind of mid-tempo power chorus songs. We need something that's going to peel the paint off the walls when we get down to the clubs in the States. And so our songs, we take a while on our music, and we definitely, we don't depend on a producer to help us formulate our ideas. I mean, the last two records we've made, which were Master Volume and our newest record, Fuck Art, we made with John Goodmanson, who's an incredible producer. But, John has been very vocal about the fact that the battle is won and lost in the band, in the jam space, basically. And that's how I feel too. It's, you've got to, I think there's a tendency now that bands are super lazy, and I'm not saying all of them, but there's definitely a modern trend of having an idea and then going to a studio and having a producer help you put it together and looping things. And, you lose the magic that way. It's definitely a path of less resistance, and there's less fighting. There's less hard feelings and arguments. But you also lose the magic of working on things and discovering those moments through playing them live and trying things different ways, and really, really bashing your music out like hardening steel, And that's how that's our process, and we'll never deviate from it, because I find that I don't think I'd be able to live with myself if somebody told us what to do. I would rather have somebody come in and give us some opinions at the 11th hour to try and tidy things up here and there and give us some suggestions, but us having put in 95% of the work. I would rather live and die that way than, have a producer put it together and it be more successful, but more generic. I'm not sure if that's an exact, I kind of went for a little rip there.
No, you're fine. In terms of playing the music, are there any, maybe perhaps playing live, that are your favorites to play, that are the most fun to play? Any standout ones, or are they all kind of the same in that way?
There's definitely ones that I think usually it's always funner. The newer songs are always funner because they're fresher, but some of the older songs that are still the funnest to play are the ones that are, I guess, let's see, what's really fun to play. I really like playing Smoking is Magic. That's a really fun one. Yeah, I don't know. There's not the ones I think that we have the most elegant arrangements for as a band become the ones that are the funnest to play. The ones that are a little bit more technical become a little bit more, they're just a little bit, the fancier songs with fancier syncopated parts and stuff. I think those ones become a little less fun to play over playing them a million times. But there's a certain pride when you can get those parts really tight and you feel really good about them. But there's some songs I think in our catalog that I always feel that they sound good. And there's other ones that we kind of have to play our way into a little bit and practice a bunch and have a couple warm up nights to really hit our stride with. But I think the funnest songs to play live are just the ones that the people go off the hardest to. So really basically anything off of Master Volume and anything that we've debuted so far off of Fuck Art, people really seem to like. So there's no real standouts for me. I really like playing all of them.
Well, I mean, I think in terms of the what fans and audiences are connecting with is, I feel like it could be different every time. You go to one location, then to another, an audience may react totally different to a different song, and so I think it could be kind of interesting to have one audience may love or may react strongly to this song, and then another does the same thing. And so I think that's a kind of a cool, you never know what you're going to get, I guess.
Yeah, it was interesting to take Master Volume on the road through the United States and really see which regions responded to which songs. And, when we went through the South, funny enough, the faster songs were really popular. And then when we went through the Midwest, the slower songs were more popular. And there's some kinds of lines like that. geographic lines that seem to kind of separate our catalog that way. But there's also just particular nights where the crowd is so on your side before you even start playing that every single song you start, it just seems people are even more pumped than the last one and looking at each other like, oh, they're playing this one. And to us, we're just like, we're just doing our set, but it's super great.
It's amazing.
It's those kinds of moments and those nights really remind me, especially in the context of right now, where, you know, as I said, we're facing a limited set of circumstances that really drive home to me the importance of working really hard on your music, and at the same time really drive home the point to me that we're a very lucky band, you know, to get to enjoy that kind of response to our music.
Yeah. Now with touring, like there's the song Super 8. I remember you having talked about in the past, having gone on tour and had all these different, you know, stayed at these different motels and all of that. And what was that experience like? Because I feel like with touring, of course, the shows themselves could be so exciting, so interesting. But I feel like, again, with touring, you never know what you're going to get. You might go to this location, to that location. Was that kind of lifestyle, for lack of a better word, is that something you can feel at home with? Or is it at times tough being on the road, going from place to place to place?
I think that everybody that's kind of hit our age, which is 30 and is still touring, has a very love-hate relationship with touring. When you get a certain amount of kilometers or miles, if you're American, under your belts, that's just how it works. It's a very extreme way to live, because you basically wake up in a motel or a hotel if you're lucky enough, and it's usually on the outskirts of town, and you get, you know, some coffee made by a machine, and maybe you eat a plastic waffle, and then you get in the van, and you drive for 8 hours, and then you're racing to get to this venue. You get there, the venue's not open yet. You load all your stuff in, you sound check, and you have hours to kill. And then you play a show, and you feel like you've taken part in this unbelievable communion of rock and roll, and you connect with human beings that appreciate what you've dedicated your life to. And it's just a profound experience every night that gets to happen. And then you ride this high, and you talk to people afterwards, and you tear your gear down, and then you go back to the hotel, and the process repeats. So I only kind of outline it that way to illustrate that it is a very peaks and valleys daily existence that is definitely taxing when it's done in a sustained way, which is typically how touring's done. So
sure.
Yeah, touring's tough. I mean, long story short, it is tough. It's both physically and mentally very demanding to maintain yourself and give everything that you've got every night to the people that have come out to see you play. Yeah. So yeah, Super 8 is kind of the distillation of the feelings that I had about touring Higher Power, our first record, and some of the, you know, we were staying in the worst places that we ever stayed on Higher Power, and there was a lot of bugs and a lot of gunshots and a lot of strange things. And yeah, so that song is a love letter to the cheap motels of the United States, where we have spent lots of time and drawn a lot of inspiration from.
Yeah. I mean, Super 8 is an example, but do you often write on the road? Do you find that being in that headspace causes you to have inspiration for songwriting?
Sometimes it does. I mean, I'm usually when I find that when we're on tour, I'm in such a state of just trying to preserve my energy to be able to give the best show that I personally can from my side of the stage, that I just don't have a whole lot of energy to do other stuff. But when there is extra energy left over, I definitely love trying to jot things down. And I keep a journal all the time. Every year I fill up like a journal.
Oh, cool.
And so I like to kind of look back on stuff, and you always think you're going to remember everything, but you just don't. And I learned that early on in our touring career, and I'm happy that I decided to document as much as I could. So yeah, I try and just, when I'm feeling, in a particularly elevated state, whether it's positive or negative, I try and record how I'm feeling and why I'm feeling that way with handwriting, because I find that it's easier to draw upon when I'm home. But there's definitely, I think when it comes to writing, there's things that we definitely do write on the road, and we work on things at sound check. And, I definitely like riffing on the road and just trying out new riffs and saying, hey guys, what do you think about this one? And tinkering away with lyrics in the van. There's not much else to do, but I find a lot of the times, like, when we're touring in the fall/winter, everybody always gets sick. So you don't have a lot of extra time to sit around with acoustic guitars singing. You're just trying to like make sure you can sing that night to do the show. So yeah. I mean, writing on the road can be, sometimes it can just be a bit of a bridge too far, but sometimes it can be really fruitful. And I find that, if we're able to like kind of keep working on songs when we're sound checking and trying things out live, then it's the best way to develop songs rather than just in the vacuum of the jam space, really getting to try them out in front of people and make adjustments afterwards.
For sure. Are there, now talking about other bands or other music, are there any artists that you've been listening to these days? Perhaps it could either be other rock bands or other artists that you've been filling up your time with this year, or any that come to mind?
Yeah, there's a band from Toronto called the OBGMs, and they just put out a new record called The Ends, and it's really good. It's a really strong punk record, and they've been a band for almost as long as we have, so it's great to see them put out a really kick-ass record. Then there's a band called Bike Thieves from Mississauga, Ontario, and they just put out a record. I'm trying to remember what it's called. I can't quite remember what it's called offhand, but Bike Thieves are a good band. Great record they just put out. Really excellent lyrics. And who else? Yeah, I mean, a lot of our friends have put out records this year, and it's been great to see people trying new things. I think one of the main divergence of strategies that I've seen this year is, number one is, well, let's just sit on everything until things get better. And the number two is, well, real life is still happening. So there is no pause button for life. So let's make a plan and do our best. And I'm definitely more of a fan of the latter, because, I think if there's one thing that I've really learned in rock and roll is that there's no spare time, and sitting around and not being productive and not doing stuff. I just feel like you always pay a cost for that. So I'm definitely, I have a lot of respect and appreciation for people that are thinking outside the box in deploying their records this year and doing interesting content to support them. But I also sympathize with the point of view of waiting until touring resumes. But I think that, yeah, I'm a storm the hill at all costs kind of guy.
Yeah.
So I definitely, as I said, I appreciate seeing that energy from other people too.
Yeah, I guess I'm the same way. Like in the back of my mind, I want to take a break and stop, but then I feel like the day I start doing that, I regret it. And I feel like I start to get anxious and stressed. And so I kind of, for better or worse, I just got to kind of keep going. So
yeah, I hear you.
Yeah. Well, Luca, I love talking to you. Is there anything else about perhaps the new album, the new singles you've released are fantastic, by the way.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. Is there anything else? Yeah. Is there anything else about either the band in general or perhaps the upcoming album you want to mention? I don't want to leave anything unsaid.
I would say that Kyle is the greatest rock and roll drummer of all time. I would say that Ross Miller is the greatest bass player, hype man of all time.
Yep.
And I'm very proud that I get to play with those guys. And I'm extremely proud of our new album, Fuck Art. It's all for the children, and it comes out on New Year's Eve.
That's awesome.
I would just say as a general sentiment to anybody listening out there that it's a super weird year, but it's a good year to just focus on whatever you want to do. And as much of as an impulse as there is to kind of despair about the prospects of everything, I think it's important to recognize that things will get better, and to just, as I said, not despair. Just pour yourself into your work and to your friends to whatever extent you can, and keep your head up.
Yeah. All right. Well, Luke, thank you so much again for taking the time. You're welcome back whenever you would like. Best of luck.
Oh, yeah.
Or I can't wait to hear the new album, and I hope to see you on tour sometime next year if things go well. And please take care and stay safe. Okay.
You as well, Henry. Thank you very much for having me, and hail, hail, rock and roll.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did, and we'll see you next time.